Good morning, everyone. As people are coming in, I'd like to welcome you this morning to our first plenary session. My name is Stephanie Marsden, and I'm part of the Stewardship Kaleidoscope planning team. I hope that you found the workshops this morning helpful and informative and valuable to you all. Just a couple of quick notes and reminders for today. After the workshop this afternoon, we are going to enjoy a sponsor appreciation reception in the foyer in the ballroom. So please join us for some time between 4:30 and 6 before you enjoy your first evening. Again, it is going to be a hosted bar, so no tickets, no cash required. So have a happy hour before you go to your happy hour, and come enjoy our sponsors. As we continue to wear masks indoors, regardless of vaccination status, please continue to be vigilant, as this is how we make sure we are taking care of our neighbors. And I have seen all of you adhere to that, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you. I also wanted to let everyone know, as you have seen, we do not have bottled waters this year, but we do have cups. We are being good stewards and with no bottled waters, but we do have our plastic cups, and there's filling stations around the area, as well as those of you who are virtual. All of your mailing and the packets that you will receive in the mail will be they are compostable. Thank you. I have it written down. I could not think of the word. So compostable. And as you can see, as dinner last night, we had paper plates as well. So those of you who are in the midst of looking into 2022, next year, we will be in Savannah, Georgia, September 26th through the 28th. And we're really excited about Savannah, Georgia. For those of you who haven't been there, it's an amazing little town. If you have an idea for a workshop or know someone who would be a valuable participant, please submit those workshop proposals through our call for presenters, which is now open on our Stewardship Kaleidoscope website. We would love to hear your ideas and people that you may know. Reminder that if you leave the room for any reason during the presentation, please use the walkway at the top and come down, unless you want to be on the video and say hi to our friends virtually, but please don't do that. If you have any questions about anything, please come to the planning team that have the Ask Me stickers, and if we don't know the answer, we will get them for you. Our pop-up bookstore, as many of you have may seen this morning, is available today, open, and there are people manning that bookstore. You can order books from the Presbyterian Publishing Company. We have samples of the books that we're selling. We also have the Plenary's leaders books that you can take home with you, and all will be at the table in the ballroom. So please stop by and take a look at those. And finally, again, our fabulous sponsors are here today to chat with you in the ballroom. They're set up with, so please stop by their tables to say hi and get some information, some good swag to take home, and learn about their services for you guys. And make sure to come by this afternoon at 4:30 to celebrate them in the ballroom and in the foyer. So at this time, I would like to introduce a video for the Board of Pensions.
On behalf of the Board of Pensions of the Presbyterian Church USA, welcome to Stewardship Kaleidoscope. We are pleased to be partners again this year, as collectively we seek a culture of generosity. You know, generosity is not simply giving a little bit out of what extra we might have. It's actually digging deep so that others can experience the same wholeness in life with which we have been blessed. The Board of Pensions is a manifestation of that care for those who have answered God's call in ministry. Some are ordained pastors, but many more are the lay employees of our many different ministries, camps and conference centers, seminaries, colleges and universities, retirement communities, daycare centers, all the things that make the Presbyterian Church what it is in our communities today. We serve over 65,000 individual members, and we try to bring them a program that focuses on the wholeness of the individual, the life abundant that Christ promises. We seek to serve in 4 primary areas: spirituality, finance, health, and vocation. By supporting these areas, we allow those who have answered God's call to ministry to bring their best selves, to give their full gifts to the ministry. And so, as we embark together on this kaleidoscope adventure, we want to stay with you, be a partner with you, because the way we create a culture of generosity is a demonstration to the world of the kingdom of God. I hope you enjoy your time together. Thank you.
Well, when you see your name on the board, you get up. Oh. Good morning. I am Rosemary Mitchell, Senior Director of Mission Engagement and Support for the Presbyterian Mission Agency. We are both a sponsor and your partner in mission. Your voluntary contributions as Presbyterian congregations, mid-councils, and individuals to shared mission, to the 4 special offerings, and to per capita make ministry possible in 80 countries and the United States. Your gifts also ensure that our denomination continues as a leader in bringing the good news of Jesus Christ to the lost, the least, and the left out around the world. On behalf of your national staff, I'm honored to bring greetings and gratitude for your ministry with us and for all of your generosity. Within the last week to 10 days, the clerk of session of your congregation should have received a copy of this book, Igniting a Movement Engaged in God's Mission. With this book included a customized report of your congregation's giving in 2020 and a request to include Presbyterian mission, special offerings, and per capita in your 2022 budget. We, of course, brought extra copies with us so you can show it to your clerk of session and make sure that that person looks in their mailbox and finds that very important piece of mail. If you or members of your session have questions about Presbyterian mission, please feel free to contact me or one of your mission engagement advisors, all of whom are here. You see their pictures up here. They are deployed geographically throughout the United States. They are all present here at this conference, and we have a table in the exhibit hall. Your mission engagement advisor, or MEA, is located in your region of the United States. All of them are present at Stewardship Kaleidoscope, and please know we are here to help. And now I invite you to turn your attention to a very brief video on Presbyterian mission. Please know that this video is available for your use with your congregation or your mid-council. Thank you for your ministry and your very generous support of Presbyterian mission and all you do to build up the body of Christ. Thank you. In Matthew 25, we read the question, Lord, when did we see you? In other words, when did we recognize or acknowledge what was right in front of us? When did we look around, see and perceive the needs of our community? Jesus Christ compels us to see, to recognize, and to respond to the world around us with the heart, mind, and spirit of faith. As members of the body of Christ, we are called and compelled to respond. We are the church together, living out the call of Christ. Gifts to shared mission, given without restrictions, allow for the church's timely response when and where it is needed most. When your congregation contributes to shared mission or basic mission, your gifts are fully flexible. Every dollar makes it possible to support the ongoing ministries of the whole church, as well as innovations and emergencies in times of pandemic, injustice, or disaster at every level of our church. For every season and every age, the church is invited anew to answer the question of Matthew 25, and today act to eradicate systemic poverty, dismantle structural racism, and foster congregational vitality. Since our earliest days as a denomination, we have joined together in support of the mission of the whole church. As Presbyterians, we live and engage in ministry as members of a connectional system, professing by our actions and with our gifts that we can accomplish far more together than any one of us can do alone. When did we see you? Let us see together Jesus among the least of these. Embrace the call of Matthew 25 and empower the church to further the love and justice of Christ and spread the good news of the kingdom of God to the farthest corners of the earth.
Good morning. It's an honor to be in front of you this morning. My name is Bill McConnell. I'm one of those mission engagement advisors that was smiling at you from the screen. And I'm also a member of the Stewardship Kaleidoscope Planning Committee this year. It's my pleasure to introduce our second plenary speaker. This morning, we are excited to hear from Dr. Aimee Laramore. Dr. Laramore currently serves as the philanthropic strategist for the first PhD in African American preaching and sacred rhetoric in the nation, and that is at Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis. She is a speaker and a consultant with Allied Solutions, providing expertise in development, diversity, and organizational effectiveness. She has served as an associate director of the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving at Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and also has served as a director of seminary advancement. Dr. Laramore is the author of Everyone a Philanthropist, Generating Everyday Generosity. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laramore to you. Dr. Laramore, we look forward to what you have to share with us.
Good morning. I am excited to be here with you, but I will name the fact that I have not been with a live audience since March of 2020. I can tell you that I am so incredibly grateful for your community. Glenn, who came and prayed with me this morning as he stopped and shared with me, I am grateful to you. I will also share with you that I have not spoken in an unscripted manner since 2019, when I did a December presentation for the Lilly Endowment about clergy debt. And I had taken a month sabbatical in November of 2019, and I called it a silent sabbatical of sorts. I went away and stopped talking. I was really, I don't even use the word overwhelmed. Do some of you have words you just don't even use? I don't use the word overwhelmed, but in the fall of 2019, I was granted and took with glee a month away from my ministry work, from my fundraising work. And when I came back, the first speaking engagement I had was for the endowment where, again, in deep prayer, I spoke with notes without a scripted manuscript of speaking points to really share with those individuals in a way that they said was meaningful. I pray you'll say the same thing. When people share the bio information, I think the two things I would encourage is that I do orient towards being a philanthropic strategist, and I'm a Jesus girl. That probably helps identify kind of at the core. I am not Presbyterian. I'm not Lutheran. I love Jesus. And I orient towards helping people to understand that because many of you have been disappointed when you asked me about my affiliation. And I was like, nope, I'm not that or that either. I will tell you that my orientation towards faith and fundraising has been shaped in so many different ways that becomes part of our presentation and part of the story. When I got the original email and call from Bill, we talked about what might be most meaningful for our time together. Often I'm asked to speak about creating a culture of generosity. I love it. I'm excited about it. Year-round philanthropy is what I do. I tell you, I can get excited about a parking lot, about a roof. However we need to raise the resources, I'm there for it. And I'm a realist. My work started in nonprofit fundraising, in door knocking, in community organizing, going door to door, asking people for resources. I don't know that that's ever anybody's plan. It surely was not mine. I was ear hustling a conversation at breakfast this morning, and someone said that they were from Maumee, Ohio. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. I thought success was getting out of my community, not staying in. When I applied to colleges, going to Purdue was kind of running across the border. I figured my mother would not drive 4 hours to check on me every day. It was a high factor in deciding where I would go. I talk about diversity at the intersection of faith and giving because I often feel like it's a missing aspect of the work that we do. We talk about a culture of generosity. We talk about the altered landscape of religious giving. We dig deeper into the numbers. Even nowadays, we do more conversation about the money talk. But this whole idea of diversity seems to create a little stress for us one way or the other. I pray that we will have a good set of conversations and engagement as we talk about it today. We were in the pandemic when a colleague asked me to contribute to a publication. At the time, I had no idea what would come about. Crisis and Care, Meditations on Faith and Philanthropy. When she invited me in the middle of the pandemic, I was not under the misimpression that someone just wanted to know my deep reflections about what was happening. Because of my work with the first PhD program in African American preaching and sacred rhetoric, my conversation partners are pastors who minister in a variety of denominations, who lead, who worship, who are social justice warriors all across the nation, and they are pursuing a PhD. In our conversations, in coming together, I was actually part of hosting a course the week that we got notified that we would no longer be on campus. On Wednesday, I was Lysoling tables and wiping down our meeting space. And by Monday, the seminary and Butler University had gone completely virtual. How many of you remember that immediate transition into a world that you were not necessarily thinking about? I mean, really, if you're honest, I've been working with several, maybe not you, congregations like you, to simply update your website. So going completely virtual for many people seemed like an amazing stretch. And so when I was asked to write about this topic, I chose to focus on emergency bags in crisis, what we carry and what we leave behind. I mean, if you think about, in case of an emergency, what do you actually preserve and keep and hold on to? And what do you release and let go? It's not the first time in my life, and I imagine not the first time in yours either, where you've had to think about, what are the most essential things I will keep, and what are the things that I will let go? Having now been in our house for 16 years, I woke up one day and realized, I don't know where this kitsch came from. I don't know, like, what happened where shelves had little sayings on them and there were little things. I don't know about you, but I envision myself as this kind of mainstream person. I don't know, is that your experience? You wake up and you say, like, where did this stuff come from? When I was a young mother, I wanted a Christmas tree with all of the ornaments in one color. I wanted the lights, I mean, the twinkle lights. I just wanted it to just look like a Hallmark card. There's a story there. I thought I was going to work for Hallmark. I mean, I believed in the setup of picture perfect. If you look at my Christmas tree today, each of those 3 kids has made ornaments over a lifetime. There is no color theme or pattern. I know every snowflake that was made out of cotton balls, and it looks like I have grown up in the rural South in the most country of homes, and I would really take you out if you tried to change it. I don't know that it had occurred to me in the midst of crisis that you really have to think about, you can only preserve so much. You can only hold on to a few things. You can't take it all with you. And I'm going to deeply endeavor in our time together to talk about the things and to ask and invite you to think about, what do you hold most dear that you carry with you? And what do you just release and let go? At my best, I'll do that without a whole lot of tears today. It's also the first time that I've spoken since the loss of my mom in the pandemic. So for me, all of this is not only about generosity and giving and church and all of these things we love, but it's also about the real life that happens in the everyday of what we do. What is most important and what do you simply let go? I tell you, I don't come before you to say that the entire pandemic has been an incredible loss of everything. I will talk about loss. But I'll also ask you, what are you carrying with you? What gifts and blessings and benefits have come during this season? If we're honest, Many of us have had incredible revelations during this time. Keep the Keurig. I'm never using it again. I've been making brewed coffee for 18 months. I will never go back. It's the right flavor, the right temperature, the right mix. I asked my husband, what do you feel like today? It's all a good thing. Is she talking about caffeine? I'll get better. I had the gift of my 3 children being back home together at a time where I didn't anticipate wanting to be with them. I am a mother of hybrid adults, 17, 19, and 21. When the pandemic first happened, I started wondering, why is the house so small? It did not seem like it was this small. Why is it so small? There is nothing more exciting than navigating 5 people on the internet, doing school and work at the same time, on the same Wi-Fi line, with a husband who says, I told you, that's why I get it. You get credit for that. And I became, I know it may not be your story, slightly more judgmental, just a little bit. And my husband would be on the call and I'd be like, why are they allowing you to talk like that in the meeting? It's not my meeting, it's not my business, it's not my field of study. I'm simply irritated at hearing your voice. I'm grateful to be married. I appreciate 26 years we just celebrated, but I tell you, his voice sounded like nails on a chalkboard within 30 days. I'm a consultant, so you might say she was used to working at home. I'll give this reflection for you to consider. I was working at home alone. They weren't there. So all of the time that I spent enjoying my house and my home office and the setup was immediately changed when 5 people were sharing that space. I'm glad you laugh with me a little bit, because I'll tell you, it was a tremendous time for our family. Even in the midst of loss, I have a 17-year-old who bakes the best banana bread now as a result of the pandemic. We had more family dinners than I ever anticipated were possible, and they were good. We took family walks in a way that we haven't done since I was pushing a double stroller with one on the hand. And so I ask you to think about, for yourself, for your church, and for your congregation, as we talk about all the things that we lose during this time, that we also take time to think about, celebrate, and reflect on exactly what we have been able to gain. I'd like to explore the best stewardship and giving practices, and that typically is my focus. Excellence in the diversity landscape of religious giving, understanding how diverse streams of income and diverse givers can benefit the church. It gets me really excited. And typically in that conversation, I lean far to that first column. When I'm engaging with churches and nonprofits and congregations, I'm starting with language. I just want to know, how do you talk about giving? How do you talk about money? Do you only talk about money when you're talking about giving? When do you talk about debt? Are you educating people about the role of debt in ministry, in life? I'll tell you, the first 6-figure gift that I secured for the PhD program was a little odd, because I was meeting with a donor and I kept thinking that I knew the donor. We went through his history and his background. I met his wife. We were in conversation, and I just kept thinking, I know them not from this context. How many of you have gotten to an age and stage where you start to wonder about what you actually remember? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm just asking you to come with me. And so I was sitting with the donor. I was deeply believing that I knew them from a different season of life. And at some point, the donor said, we spent a decade in Toledo, Ohio at First Church of God. And I was like, ding, 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 ding. That would be the match. That's where it's from. And as he went on to tell his story of the gift from his father that led to him opening up his first dealership and now owning 3 dealerships, I have to admit, nobody should talk about this. As a fundraiser, I stopped listening just for a moment. If you stop listening too long, you're going to lose your gift. Just for a moment, I thought to myself, what in the forever world? I was a teenager while they were at our congregation. He was a financial maven back then. He knew the implications of debt. And in Sunday school, we were still talking about Noah's Ark. How is it that no one with that background was talking to all of the college students about no life-altering debt as a pathway to life? How is it no one was talking to us about entrepreneurship? I mean, let me tell you, I was a dutiful Church of God girl. I went to morning service. I went to evening service. I went to Sunday school. I went to midweek. My grandmother said, wear Navy. I wore Navy. She said, usher. I ushered. She said, sing. I said, you know, that's not a good idea. And she said, sing. And I joined the junior choir. Whatever you say, I just did it. But in all of the service about Bible and about study and about God and about prayer, nobody was talking to me about money. How is it possible that we have gifts and talents in our pew and we never think about the implications for the rest of the congregation and the young people too? I'm grateful that they gave that first 6-figure gift to the program. But I was deeply impacted by the fact that while they were in our congregation, we never leveraged their skills to benefit, teach, train, educate, and expand the horizons of the people who were with them. I tell you, my grandmother is probably my biggest influence in generosity. And people teach what they know. So as a generous person, she taught generosity. As a person who cared deeply about education, she taught get an education. She educated 3 girls in private school, made sure they all got college degrees, and that ethic continued. We simply didn't know that education will never close the racial wealth gap. You can degree yourself forever, and it does not close the racial wealth gap. I was standing in my kitchen at the island when an article from Duke University came across my email, and in 5 short pages, they explained why education would never change the racial wealth gap. They didn't say it wasn't a good idea. They didn't say don't get a degree. They didn't say stop getting educated. They simply said the math doesn't work. We keep educating people who get in debt to go into professions that don't pay for the degrees that they earned. And we say get more education, which usually means more debt. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for anybody, including clergy. So when I'm talking about generosity and I'm talking about diversity in giving and the opportunities around creating a culture of generosity, I always just start with language. Who is talking about money? How are we talking to one another? And how do we engage this topic in our congregation? I'm big on communication. I'm a visual learner. It's very hard for me to sit still. All of you who are writing notes, typing notes, taking pictures, you are my kindred spirit, because in a workshop, if I'm doing nothing, I'm really asleep. I mean, I don't have a disorder. I'm just saying that, like, I need somebody to engage me. It's just who I am. And so when I think about the impact of how we understand giving and generosity, I'm always wondering, how are you communicating about this wonderful opportunity 365 days a year? And often congregations tell me about when they're asking. And I want to know how you're asking, but I want to know how you're preaching and teaching and talking about money, not just how you're asking. I want to know how you're reflecting and understanding the giving and analyzing what has happened historically and learning from what you've done well and what you haven't done well. I want to know that part too. I want to know also how you're keeping the momentum going, how you're keeping people excited, how you're celebrating givers. I mean, go to my basic 101 workshop and I'll tell you, this idea of celebrating the parking lot ministry and celebrating anybody who teaches Sunday school, it's great. As someone who spent over 10 years in youth ministry, celebrate us. As a mother of 3 who was still serving other children, yes, I believe in that celebration. But the reality is that in addition to that celebration, we also have to celebrate givers as well. And so I want to know how you're communicating with people about your gratitude for their gift, not their tax letter, not the requirement to acknowledge what they've given, but how you celebrate. Thank you so much for all that you have done to help make this ministry thrive. That expression of gratitude is an easy one for me because I don't do a workshop where I don't talk about how you say thank you. You have me at hello with a handwritten note. Anybody else in the audience still keep the postal office in service? There's a great coffee. Have you seen the new coffee stamp? Coffee and latte and cappuccino, I tell you, you see it, it's a wonderful thing, but I digress. When is the last time you sent a personal note of thanks to simply let someone know, I appreciated your gift, I appreciate you, I'm thinking about you, I care about you. I promise you, I would rather spend all of my time on that side of the reflection. I talk about consistency, not simply the pledge campaign or the pledge season or a particular time of year. I know that based on our various traditions, there's a focus of when we ramp up our giving conversation. In nonprofits, we talk about time, talent, and treasure. And I always thought that equation was too simple to begin with. For us, it's really time, talent, treasure, and testimony. And that should be happening all the time. That people should have the ability to talk about how their lives have been radically changed by generosity, and not just the getting of a gift, but the giving of a gift. When do people get the opportunity to talk about and speak about the gift of giving? What kept me in Toledo after I completed my undergraduate work was a conversation with a philanthropist who asked for a tour of a neighborhood in Toledo. I was volunteering. I had simply been voluntold by my mother that nobody with a degree should be at home. And so when she left for work, she said, simply leave my house until you find a job, because nobody with a degree should be at home. And so I started volunteering, ended up at a community development corporation. In that community development corporation, in the basement of a church, A philanthropist asked for a tour. They asked me to do the tour. And long story short, he said, have you ever thought about bringing your gifts back home? Have you ever thought about the people who invested in you? I realized that I had not, that the only renewable scholarship that I had received when I started college was from First Church of God in Toledo, Ohio. That the other scholarships that I received were from 50 Men and Women of Toledo, a nonprofit organization of Black and Brown business owners in the community. And it had never occurred to me how I was going to give back. How is it we raise young people of faith in our communities and never ask the question about what does this congregation mean to you? What does this community mean to you? How might you come back and reinvest? I don't mean you have to stay there, but you ought to acknowledge and understand what has shaped you and what will you do about it. So ultimately, I end up talking about good fundraising practices, about the things that undergird how we engage with people, the actual acknowledgement, study, understanding, and interpretation of the way that we see giving that goes up, giving that goes down. Right before the pandemic, my own giving had changed. I was really saddened when the congregation did not even reach out to have a call, sit down, a conversation to ask what had happened. I don't unpack the story to talk about my experience, but to ask how people's giving can significantly change, and we never even have the conversation. I'm not saying, why did you stop giving? Or why did you stop giving to us? I'm saying, how are you? As a caregiver for 4 years, our lives were radically impacted when my mother had a stroke in 2017. I could have told you every statistic about educational debt, about serving young people, about different generations, about the great and silent, the boomers, the X's that never get credit. I could have talked about it all. But I had not yet entered the season of life as a caregiver. I had not yet understood the implications of long-term care. I had not done an analysis of how someone could work for their entire life, give back, contribute, tithe, and invest in their community, and get sick and go through dollars so quickly that there are not enough funds for their end-of-life care. If you don't know, you can't teach or model or train or prepare. And if we are not having those conversations in our congregations, then where should we be having them? Many financial planners have no idea what your core values are or what's most important to you. And we go to church, some of us morning, noon, night, midweek, Sunday school, and we never put together the pieces of what our core values are with our financial plan for the future. How is it that in this crisis, we don't learn those lessons again? And then I talk about culture, not my culture, but the culture of your church, the culture of your community, the culture of your giving, the things that people don't say on the survey. I talk about how people experience gratitude at your church, how they understand that their gifts have been valuable. Think of it as the conversations that happen in your parking lot. I engage with people about what are the things that we don't say, we don't put on the wall, is not in the membership manual. How do I know what matters most to your folks? I would invite you to think about it. If somebody had to describe your congregation in 3 words, what would those 3 words be? If somebody had to talk about the mission of your church, could they do it in a convincing way? If you had to interpret the mission of your church for someone who is unchurched, could they understand what you're talking about? Why am I asking, saying, suggesting this should be a conversation? Because I train nonprofits and have done so my entire life. I started my career as the director of the Northwest Ohio Hemophilia Foundation. I worked with medically compromised individuals early in my career, and I could not understand between community development and nonprofits why I was a magnet for organizations that did not have enough money. I mean, there was something genetically coded that if your budget was not going to balance, I wanted to serve you. I wanted to work with you. If you had 9 months of my salary, but not a year, I just felt a pull and a draw. Not a good way to live. And what I would tell you is it made me study fundraising and understand a little bit more. And in strategic planning and fundraising, often I will ask a nonprofit board, take a blank sheet of paper and write down your mission statement for me with no technology. With 20 people in a room, how many mission statements do you think I will get? Somebody said 20, she was so kind. 2, oh my goodness, I wish. Sometimes it's like 24, because some people write the original mission and what they think it should be, or the mission the first time they were on the board and the mission now. What I'm sharing with you is that the number of people who can't write the mission of the organization is daunting. Don't complain about your neighbors too much. I find it in our church communities as well. Why can we not explain what we're committed to do? What we want to see happen, what puts us on fire for God, what is different in the world because of our ministry. If we cannot clearly articulate what we're committed to for Christ, how is it that raising money can be a priority? Raise money for what? To accomplish what? To do what? To see what transformation? These are the things that I typically talk about in giving practices and excellence in development. But I'll tell you, the last 5 years at least have been increased requests for conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, and cultural competence in our faith communities. It means that I am the most unpopular workshop known to humankind. When you invite me and say, let's talk about diversity and giving, I say, let's not. Half the people may not show up for this reason alone. Let's ease into the conversation. Aimee, I don't like your sarcasm. I'm being for real. Sometimes we talk about it in workshops, and we never talk about it at the kitchen table. We never talk about it in session. We rarely talk about it at home. We don't have a conversation with our neighbor. It is patently unrealistic to change the orientation towards diversity in giving if everyone freezes up if the word is mentioned in the room. Let me tell you, I teach fundraising and governance at Notre Dame. I'm excited about the opportunity every time I'm with our graduate students. This summer, I had the opportunity for the first class in about a year and a half that we were in person. In that class, I asked how many individuals had hired someone in DEI in the last year. The majority of the class raised their hand. And I asked, are you praying for your staff? It's daunting to introduce a topic that most people don't want to talk about and fewer want to address every day of your life. It's like Groundhog Day in the worst way. Wake up and do it again, and people don't want to hear you either. Why would I say this in this community where we are all committed to the same God and the same Christ? Because if we can't talk about it, nothing's ever going to change. If we can't have the conversation, we'll be in this same place when the next 10 speakers come. I had the wonderful opportunity to serve as the Associate Director of a Lake Institute on Faith and Giving. And for those of you who know Bill Enright, then give me some grace because he's great. And so if you don't like me, you could say, but he loves her. He does, he really does. And so what I would tell you is that in working with advancing mission and working with different groups as part of Lake Institute, we really had the opportunity to engage with people who would often tell us the Lord will provide as a fundraising strategy. You go to a room and be the teacher, trainer, speaker when individuals say, but the Lord will provide. I'm not a theologian, but I quickly had to get undergirded to say, and God blesses the work of our hands. So let our hands get busy in this area of fundraising, stewardship, and raising resources for the church. One of the first things that I encountered was that we often have a lack of diversity in our givers, not in who we're helping. So I would go to a website and I would see people who look just like me as the recipients of the generosity of the church. I'm grateful. I celebrate your philanthropy and your giving. Your generosity matters. But you want me as a donor. You want me to see myself as part of the solution. You want me as a giver. So how come I don't see myself as one of the individuals providing service or providing the gifts? Oftentimes, when we think we have diversity in our images, we may miss the opportunity to help everyone to understand that you are a philanthropist too. How did I get there that quick? I wasn't trying to get there. Act like you didn't see it. Philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. Let me tell you, I love quotes, love them. If you see me on Instagram or Twitter, you're going to see lots of them. But I am very reluctant to quote people out of context. I think it's a dangerous part of our society of 30-second engagement on social media. My reluctance in quoting Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King is because we often talk about his peace mission and not his economic mission. And so we don't look at the full story. And the full story, I would share with you, ought to include a clear understanding that philanthropy, while commendable, should still make us think about why philanthropy is necessary in the first place. When I come to you and I share stories and experiences, what I hope you will see, understand, and engage with is the fact that my background is diverse. The best educator I ever had in philanthropy was Hazel A. Taylor, my grandmother, who just really said, come and sit on the pew. It doesn't matter how you're feeling. It doesn't matter what you're doing. I was sharing with someone earlier today that I was dutiful and I followed directions, and much of my adult ministry life was one of do what you've been told to do. And I raised these independent thinking hybrid adults. The first challenged scripture at 9, walked out of her first sermon at 13. I have her permission to share this with you. At a little girl, she said, I know you named him Noah, but are you going to tell him the truth about the animals? I mean, I had the nursery theme and I had like 2 of every animal. And she said, but scientifically, look, little girl, your brother, Noah Samuel, is blessed of God, and you stop questioning anything I tell him about these animals or this wall. You and I are good. We raised them to talk. We thought it was a gift that they could read at 4. We raised them to be opinionated. We told them, you have a voice. Let your voice be heard. Enter a room and take up space. And then they started challenging me. My son said, I love Jesus and I love church. It's a shame that we don't do what we do at camp and actually talk about the Bible. He was going to a religious camp. They were doing a very good job. They were doing devotionals. They had journals for several weeks at a time. They would be immersed in the word. I was excited about it. And he came home and he said, it's a shame we don't do that at church. Why are we raising the resources? To what end? To reach whom? To provide what ministry services? How do you connect to individuals, and how do you make a difference if you don't understand what the dollars are about? Philanthropy simply means for the love of humankind, and that means that all of us have the opportunity to serve as a philanthropist. I think it's unfortunate that we often think rich and wealthy and dead and white when we think about giving, when that equation is so much larger and the opportunity to make a difference is so much more diverse. It was about 5 years ago that I was approached by a few colleagues who said, we are curious whether you know the data about fundraisers of color and donors of color in the church. I had done work for years. I had asked the same questions. We were struggling to be able to provide data that was relevant to all of our communities. And we asked individuals, do you have the data? Do you have the data? Have you seen the data? Do you know the numbers? And ultimately, what we decided is that we needed to do the research ourselves. So we created the Collective Foundation, and we started asking additional questions of religious fundraisers of color, serving both majority and minority communities, and asking them, what are your experiences in raising resources? We started asking the questions and answering the questions because we could not find the data that we needed. How are you asking different questions and seeking answers that may not exist? We are in a time that is distinctly different from what we thought even just 18 months ago. How many of you at some point thought, I'm done with the mask? I'm done with the ordering? Maybe it wasn't your story. I really thought that I was like on the end of this piece. I was like, no more group orders, no more boxes in the cars. We don't have to have them in the pantry, in the entryway. When a contractor comes in, we don't have to check them at the door. And just as I was getting good and comfortable, I started ordering masks, sending them to children in other states, reinstituting every protocol, re-upping every sanitizer protocol, because I thought by now we'd be at a different place. When we think about our fundraising and our generosity journey, oftentimes we think it's going to be in a different place at this season, and we have to ask different questions and challenge in different ways. Serving as the philanthropic strategist for the first PhD program in African American preaching and sacred rhetoric could as well be a title that simply says troublemaker. We accepted PhD students, and I started asking questions as the director of seminary advancement. What's the budget? What's the average loan amount of the student coming in? How much debt will the students be in when they finish? What's the long-term plan for endowment and sustainability of the program? We were so excited. We got it accredited. We were just like flying high. Applications were rolling in. The candidates were excellent. And I just started asking those pesky questions about, but what about the money? Are we going to put people in more debt and then ask them to go serve more? How do you wrestle with those pieces together? When Bill called me and invited me, if you're upset about it, go back to Bill. When he invited me, he identified the mission was to create for the Stewardship Kaleidoscope, an event that ignited generosity, gave practical tools, expanded the leadership capacity of those who lead stewardship, and cultivated adaptive approaches to funding Christ's mission. And every time I heard a statement, all I could think about was in a pandemic. Like it wasn't written, but in my mind, as a fundraiser, as a steward, as someone who teaches and preaches and talks about raising resources, every time I thought about how do you ignite generosity in faith-based communities in a pandemic? How do you give practical tools for cultivating generosity in a pandemic? How do you do all of these things in this environment? And what I will tell you is that I have been overwhelmed with the innovation and with the practical ways that individuals have navigated this space. Not every congregation is suffering during this time. Some congregational members slowed down enough to realize they weren't giving much at all. Some individuals were able to consume more ministry than they've ever consumed. I went from rushing to serve and rushing to get back and rushing for Monday morning to enjoying one set of services and saying, let me see what they're doing over here this week. I wonder how are they dealing with music? How are they dealing with the scripture? What's happening in that congregation? And as somebody who loves ministry and loves God, what happened to my resources? I started supporting ministries who I had never supported before. I might have listened to your sermon. I might have known the minister. I might have listened to your choir. But for the first time, I started investing because I was like, they're doing amazing ministry even in this season. When I was talking to pastors, one of the first things that came about was the fact that they were on 24/7. Early in the pandemic, I heard the feedback about the inability to really focus on personal care because they were so active in trying to make sure all ministry needs were met. In my own situation, we lost my mother the day before Thanksgiving in 2020. The capacity for a funeral in Indiana, 25. The ability to host a church service, non-existent. The protocols changing every 24 hours. When someone is going through crisis and loss, and they have been committed to church their entire life, the conversations between people who can no longer provide the service and care that they're accustomed to and people who need service and ministry more than they've ever needed it before is daunting. I don't know how you have been able to navigate all the particular shifts that have been necessary during this season. But can I tell you, for all the ways that you have stretched and adjusted and changed in order to serve individuals of faith and individuals in your community, I say thank you. That season was daunting. And I paid attention to every flower and every call, every text, every workaround, every service. We're doing all of this in a pandemic, and your service is being seen by those that you serve. How are you is probably the most important critical question of any season of stewardship for me. How are you? Not what are you giving, not what have you given historically, simply how are you? I have a habit of paying deep and close attention, as I'm sure many of you do. I could share story after story of donors and givers and individuals who did not need a survey or did not need a 2-hour meeting. Simply with the question of how are you would give a clue to what's happening in their stewardship life. How are you? Just sent the second off to college. What are you thinking in your mind? Tuition. How are you? Wonderful. I just got promoted on my job. Tithe and offering bonus. How are you now serving as a caregiver for my mom? Simply asking people how they are is one of the greatest gifts of our ministry life and of our stewardship walk. You have a reflection now of how I am on that screen. I'm wearing my favorite dress with one of my favorite people. Bill Enright taught me more about owning my ministry walk than almost any other person in my life. People who ask me if I'm Presbyterian, I'm close. Bill's my mentor. Serving with Bill helped me to understand that fundraising principles without God mean nothing. If at the core of what you do, we're not refocused on Christ and kingdom and what God is calling you to do in your community, in your church, in this world, then we're missing the boat. People can analyze your capital campaign, your feasibility study, whether you're ready or not. But if there is not an alignment of what you believe and what you're called to do, the definition of generosity and stewardship, philanthropy and giving is skewed in a way that really doesn't work for those who believe. I'll tell you that this whole idea of travel now for me means that I have to take a step back as I think about what are we willing to risk in this season. And so as I travel with my youngest, Andrew, for college visits and for exploring the world, one of the things that I have to realize is that he's living his life in a season where he's had one traditional year of high school. He'll graduate in June, and he's had one traditional year. I talked to our principal. I served as the president of our parent association. The maturity level of children entering high school, we're rewriting the script. They haven't had traditional life, traditional experiences. I talked about all the things we've gained, but there's certainly things that we've lost too. And in navigating all of those things, communication and understanding what we lose and what we gain is really critical in our faith communities. Those young people are the young people I left right before I came to see you. 350 of them in Washington, D.C., advocating on the Hill for the 4 issues that mattered most to them. You'll never see it on the news. You'll never read about it in a traditional paper. When my kids have gotten their driver's license, for us, it has often been sadness about driving in a world where they're seen as men and not kids. He's 17. He's almost 6'3". He has so much hair on his doggone face, they thought he was a chaperone at the conference. Do not give him extra privileges. He's a kid. Why do I share that with you personally? Because Laura Watson told me yesterday that one of the stories about my young people and their ministry experience impacted her, and she carried it with her. These are the kids that I'm navigating for ministry, and they're carrying the weight of the world. They're advocating for things that I didn't even know were priorities 5 years ago myself. They're advocating for the Crown Act because they get discriminated on based on their hairstyles. Why would you share that? Because for me, the church has to be relevant to the people it's looking to bring into community. If you don't know the issues of the young people you serve, how can we serve them effectively? I've raised my children to be givers. But the first time I told my daughter to give her tithe, she gave to the local homeless shelter that she was serving. She was in church every day of her life. We raised her in the church. We did all the things we were told to do. And she said, "You told us to give it where we thought it would make a difference." It's hard when you raise young people to think, talk, advocate, and give, and then they say, "But I'm not choosing to give to the church because I don't see the church doing the things that matter most." It doesn't have to be your story, but I wonder how many times you've had a conversation with young people and asked them, what do you see our church doing? Where do you see us making an impact? What matters most to you? Where are you giving? How can we support your interests? And what would you suggest about how we can make a difference together? I mean, we do it with donors if you're good in development. When somebody's giving to someplace else and they're not giving to you, you don't say, "Why are you giving to the symphony? Why have you chosen the zoo? Why do you support Red Cross?" Although you might deeply reflect and seek forgiveness for wondering why they don't give to the church. What we typically do is say, how have they earned your support? What have they done right and well that you are so committed to giving? How do we learn how to do what we do in a way that you would be so excited that you would give at this level to our congregation? We care deeply about your gifts, and we thank you for the difference you're making in our community. I think it's hard to talk about giving for the future if you don't talk about the history that exists. How do we engage people? Why is it important? History matters. It helps us as individuals to understand society and where we fit In Bible, we want to know the context. In exegesis, we want to understand, how did we understand this scripture? Who wrote it? Where did it come from? Whose lens was it? What was going on geographically? What was happening? History matters. It matters not only as we think about our reflection about our world history, but our church and our giving history too. How do we understand the past that we might move forward as well? I posted this picture of our family on a DePaul family website because my son didn't have a roommate. I asked for anyone who was in the same struggle, and I tried very hard to be positive and upbeat and not say that he missed the deadline. I tried to say that he was a great student, an honor student, dean's list student, a responsible kid with a slow relationship with time, and that I had gotten permission as his mother to try to seek an alternative, because if we didn't get affordable housing in Chicago, he would be studying at home again this year. And I had a beautiful family, several families talk to us and email, and we used all the channels and we made a decision. And he got a roommate. Wonderful story, end of story. Although when he was moving into his apartment, someone walked up to him and said, "Why are you here and what are you doing?" The opening conversation, like when you open the door, "Why are you here and what are you doing?" At the price point that I'm paying for rent, I tell you, what you should have said is, "Welcome and here's your basket." The person who asked him that while I was sitting in the car catching my breath, he lives high up, was the same mom that had been texting me, and we had just signed paperwork together, and she had made an agreement for our sons to live together, and her entry to relationship was, "Who are you and why are you here?" Can I share with you that I could teach you about stewardship and giving, but if we don't understand how to be kind to one another, we will fail every time. You want the best practice? Treat people with some doggone dignity. My goodness. We treat people like ATM machines and we wonder why they're mad. We treat people like their giving is an obligation. I tell you this story because it's a happy ending. I am grateful for the relationship that we've created. Our sons are living together. We have a financial contract. He has housing. He's at school. I'm praying their safety each and every day. But when your initial engagement is, "Who are you and why are you here?" the recovery is slow. It's hard to recover when that's how you start a relationship. What first impression do you leave with people as they engage with your church? Online, in person, in the chat box, on Facebook, on social media? What is the first impression that you leave? How do you make people feel? And what checks and balances exist? Because I know now that she thought nothing of it. She had seen a picture of that child online. She thought it was the same child. She wanted to make sure, and her intent was not to interrogate. It's not what happened, but that was her intent. I tell you, the first thing I did when I got my goodie bag from this conference was open up a greeting card. It was handwritten, wet signature. Can I tell you the glee of personal communication? I didn't even eat the Buckeye till like 1 a.m. in the morning. I mean, I was just like, the personal note will get me each and every time. Understand the impression that you leave with the people you engage. In reflection and in trying to be dutiful to our time. In the book, Crisis and Care, you have meditations from several different perspectives and several different people. I talk about the reality that in engaging with pastors, Although so much was going on, fundraising was not the main focus when we started meeting monthly and meeting on Zoom and talking about what was happening. They were trying to figure out how to be present in the most difficult of times and do ministry differently with all of the demands of life. We are leaving behind unnecessary complex applications, debilitating red tape, and decision delays. Let me tell you, congregations that used to require your fingerprint and 10 pages for support now have been much more generous and much more quickly. Nobody has time for that. Sometimes people would be daunted at asking for support. It took so long to get it. There's a giving circle called Vision 2020. I met the ladies several years ago. They started asking each other for $20 each when somebody would have an issue because they recognized that their church was so slow in responding to benevolence requests that it would be easier to get $20 from their friends and pay the bill than wait till all the paperwork, meetings, and decisions were made to actually help the person. Before the pandemic, you had to do all of this. After the pandemic, in the pandemic, when we realized what was most important, let's get it quicker. We were leaving behind the belief that our way was the only way. Some of us were so staunchly committed to it must be done this way, realized very quickly, we don't need 4 songs, 2 might be appropriate. We can greet each other in the chat box, good morning and how are you? It'll be all right. You might not necessarily send a text message. Let me send you a text message. How are you doing today? Our way wasn't the only way. Adopting practices that included giving to givers. In my reflection in the book, you'll see me talk about a congregation that gave resources to a giving circle because they simply said they know what's going on in their community better than we do. Sometimes we want to hold on to it so tight when there are other people who are in a better vantage point to do the work and do it well. Endowment rich while being mission, vision, and empathy poor. Having resources that do no earthly good for people in ministry remains a problem that we need to shift. I will tell you, I made the reference to the DEI earlier, and I'll close just because I don't want to get in trouble, and share with you that at my kitchen table, my husband says that DEI grinds his nerves. He says that I'd rather it be Jedi. That's also because he's a science fiction nut. He says, you know, I wish we would put justice before equity, diversity, or inclusion. I wish we would think about faith and justice as one. And I was like, Aaron, that's not a bad idea. Disney would have a problem with us using it, but it's really not a bad idea. What if we talked about Jedi and really reflected on what that could mean? And then I looked up what Star Wars defines as a Jedi. A Jedi was a devotee of the ways of the Jedi Order, an ancient order of protectors, united by their ability to harness the power of the Force. As a Jesus girl, you know what Force I'm thinking about. Adhering to the doctrine that favored the light side of the Force, the Jedi aspired to attain a state of inner tranquility through calmness and meditation while avoiding emotions affiliated with the dark side of the Force, such as anger and hatred. Do you know how many workshops I could do on Jedi? Do you understand what could happen with giving and lightsabers and the light side of the Force and all of us coming together? Well, I tell you, although there are 3 or 4 more pieces that I deeply want to unpack in the question and answer session, I will leave you with this. All of these topics are interrelated. Our personal story, our giving story, our ministry approach, the language and communication that we use, our own comfort with diversity, and our own understanding of generosity and our innovation that we introduce to our congregation or our church. David King, who later came to lead after Bill's retirement, Lake Institute, asked questions in the 3rd chapter that I think are relevant. How can we embody an ethic of stewardship in our congregations that extends beyond the offering plate and funding our budgets? What is the relationship between generosity and justice? What role must our religious institutions plan in rebuilding a sense of trust in our communities when working together for a shared future? And how can religious leaders, out of the deep resources of our faith traditions, actively step into these vital discussions of money and meaning to shape the future of philanthropy? As we think together, I hope you've been prompted to think about your own congregation, your own stewardship, your own communication style, your own language, your own comfort or discomfort with these topics, and to sit with it. Because I tell you, we have future generations that deeply need the ministry that you offer. And we have people that look just like you and me with the resources to be able to make it happen. I am Aimee Laramore, and I'm grateful for our time together today.